Um, so yeah, we've known each other for a long time. Stacey is just a rock star in the disability community. I know you wouldn't say this about you, but I'm going to say this about you, Stacey. And she has been fighting for parents and children longer than I have. And she is someone that I look up to as just a pillar in the disability community, on what she knows, and how she helps parents every single day is really amazing. And it's not just for children with autism that she helps. It's a wide gamut of everything under the sun. So I think that there'll be something for everyone in here tonight. So without further ado, let me give the floor to you, Stacey, our guest. Everybody do a silent clap or a loud clap where you're at for Stacey. Thank you so much, Stacey, for being with us. I'll let you have the floor. And then after Stacey talks, we'll do a Q&A of sorts. Okay? Stacey, it's all yours.
All righty. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I know. We did talk about the time, and I was like, oh, I don't know, 8 o'clock. That's like it's like sleepy time. Although I have to say, I feel really bad for you, Rhonda, because one of the benefits I get to do is I make my own schedule. So I would never wake up that early. I am a night owl, so it would not be. It is not uncommon to get an email from me at like 1 a.m. I work best actually from now until about 2. And then I like to get up hello at like 9:30. I mean, that's like if I had what I wanted. Yeah, I don't often get to do that, but when I do, that's what I like. Anyway, so my name is Stacey Hoaglund. Yes, I'm the president of the Autism Society of Florida, but I've been an educational advocate with an organization called Family Network on Disabilities of Broward County for 22 years. And if you live in Broward County and you have a child with a developmental disabilities, then chances are good that you would be able to get our advocacy services for free, because we are free to most families that live in Broward County. And you think like you need some advocacy support, I think at the end of, I'm going to share my screen in a minute. And I'm pretty sure at the end of it, I have contact information for Family Network on Disabilities of Broward. So we have 5 of us there. We have an English speaking advocate, we have Creole, and we have Spanish. So if you know any families who really need some support, who maybe don't speak English, we can help them out as well. I'm also the statewide coordinator of a program called Partners in Policymaking, and that is an international advocacy and leadership training program for parents of kids with disabilities and adults with disabilities. And that's like a really amazing program that's provided for free by the Florida Developmental Disabilities Council here in this state. And we bring in people from across the state of Florida into a 6-month program where you're really, I mean, you exit the program being ready to really advocate legislatively, as well as locally. So it's pretty cool. So that's a really, if you really want to really go out there and change systems, I encourage you to check that out. And again, it's free. It's everything. Back in pre-COVID times, it's 2 days a month. They would bring everybody to Orlando, and that's where we would meet, and the DD Council would cover the cost of your travel and hotel and everything. But of course, this year we had to move on to this kind of format. And you know, it was actually pretty good. It turned out okay. I was a little bit of a naysayer at the beginning because I was going to miss the hugs and, you know, being in the same physical space as other people, but I think it went okay. So what I'm going to be talking about today is, well, we're going to cover Advocacy 101. And I'm really glad to see, you know, this group here, and I hope you guys get a lot of benefit out of it. And one of the things that Pastor Joel and I were talking about was, you know, really people like myself and Pastor Joel, we get to create things that you guys need, but we can't do that if we don't know. So like he had said before in the chat, if something comes up as I'm talking and you're like, oh, I wish I knew some more about that, or like a subject or maybe a speaker or anything you can think of, just put it in the chat. That way he can kind of take that information and figure out, what he could do for you guys. Because, as an organizer myself, I can't stand it when I organize stuff and then nobody comes. We put a lot of effort into it. We're volunteers. And so we put so much effort into it. We like to be able to help the community and engage other families. So if somebody comes up, just throw it there in the chat. All right, so let me share my screen. Oh, you have to, Pastor Joel, you have to let me share my screen. Do you know how to do that?
I think so.
So I'm going to be talking a lot about kids with disabilities, but we actually have a large number of kids these days that may not have a technical diagnosis, but yet they have some behavioral challenges. So a lot of the things I'm going to talk about is going to really, so if you have a kid with a diagnosis, hopefully this will help. But if you have a kid who's, rattling your cage a little bit, maybe not has a diagnosis, but, you're really challenged and, how are you going to meet their needs? Hopefully I'm going to speak to that too.
I think you're hooked up right now, Stacey.
Okay, good. Yes, somebody's asking if you're from Calvary. Yes, Pastor Joel is from Calvary. Let's see. Okay. No. Come on. Okay. Oh, let me move this little thingy here. There we go. Okay, so I kind of just took a training that I had already created and I kind of tweaked it out a little bit. So a lot of these things have to do, particularly during times of COVID, because advocacy has changed since we've been, wrapped up inside of COVID. Yes, kids are coming back to school. Things are trying to get on, back online, as it were. But if you have a child who has an IEP, so an individualized education plan, if they go to public school, or if you have and hopefully if I'm using words that you don't know, hopefully I will describe what those are. And if you need further clarification, just let me know. But if your child was in a public school and they got the McKay scholarship and use those dollars to go to a private school, then you may have had an IEP. There are some private schools who kind of follow an IEP, but just so that you guys know, public schools that include charters like to think that they're private schools, but they're not. They are required to follow that IEP. And those are kind of like contracts that kids with disabilities get when the disability is impacting their education to a significant degree. There are kids out there who have a disability, but yet don't have this plan. And if you are wondering why that's you and you're wondering why that is, if you contact my office, we can kind of explain to you and help you if you actually do need one and your school is just telling you no. Okay, so even during COVID, there has been no relaxation on the laws. So there is a law called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's a federal law. It's out of Washington. And when COVID struck back, it was like February was when it was getting serious. And then schools stopped, going to school in March. But there was a lot of people, a lot of talk that was saying, oh, well, we can't have school, so there's no protections now. And no, not one time did the federal government say, oh yeah, schools are going to get a pass now. They were still required to at least put due diligence into meeting the needs of children with disabilities. They didn't get to just shut their doors and say, well, c'est la vie, that's how it's going to be. Now, did most schools do that? Yep, they did. But was that legal? No. And so now there are many children out there, when they have parents who understand their rights, who are getting something called compensatory education. So it's basically makeup services for those services that were missed particularly back last spring. And for some kids into the school year, depending upon the school that they go to and what's going on there. And I will get into more of that. All right, so here's just, I like this little graphic. So we got, this is in person, you know, they got their masks on and doing their thing. And then you got virtual school, and then you got the virtually impossible on the other side. It was certainly a significant challenge to try to figure out ways to educate kids in the online format, but it was not impossible. For kids with disabilities, a lot of them, well, what I saw two different types of things happen with, and again, we're talking about kids with disabilities. So for the parents, like the middle parent, so that situation, mom is at home, maybe that's a tutor, but there's somebody there with the child. Those kids, many of them actually, the parents are reporting, my kid learned more and knows more than they did this year than in previous years, because they were given that one-on-one support. They were assisted through the education process. And so we have those kind of kids. And some of those parents, they really don't want to send their kid back to school because they saw them making more progress at home than they did at school. So they're kind of figuring out, what do I want to do? And then we also have kids with disabilities to where that is just a no-go. They are not going to sit in front of a computer. It's not going to happen. They're not going to sit there. They're not going to learn. They don't understand that that's like a human on the other side there who's trying to teach me a lesson. And especially if it's a different teacher. So maybe when they were in school last year, it was Miss Smith, but now it's a new school year. So this might be Miss Jones. So who's this lady on the screen? I don't know who this lady's on the screen is. I don't have any experience with her. And so these kids just might be confused. They really don't understand. So, so what I have found that there's a huge disparity. So we've got some kids that actually did better because they've got somebody there with them during the online stuff. And then we have some kids that basically learned absolutely nothing. And that all the time out of school was basically tragic, and the amount of loss that they had to their education. And then of course we have a bunch of kids in between there, but when it comes to kids with disabilities, those are like the two main groups. Let me see if I got to shift some stuff around here. Okay, so let me go one more thing here. Okay, so more than ever, you know, students are getting caught in the middle of issues extending well beyond the classroom. And that was something that I was in, I think it was a tweet that Scott Travis from the Sun Sentinel had posted a while ago, but it says, a day after the Broward teachers, and that's like the Broward Teachers Union, sue the Broward County Schools over ending work at home assignments for teachers with medical condition. The principals group, it does that there, says that they're suing BTU, saying their lawsuit is only for show and has nothing to do with the teachers and or their health. And so those two sides were bickering. And if you've been following the news, our superintendent in Broward County is resigning. The lead attorney for Broward School, she's out. It's a bit of a chaos right now. And then we have kids in there. We have kids that are trying to get an education. And I just put this because you need to be aware that there's things going on in there that you just, as a parent, and sometimes as a teacher, because sometimes when I'm in meetings with teachers, I'll be talking to them about something and they'll say, how come I didn't know that? How come nobody tells me that? So a lot of times teachers are left in the dark too, very sadly. Okay, so where do you start? Okay, so the thing that you need to do when you are, like Pastor Joel said, I spend my days arguing. I fight. That's what I do. And that's one of the reasons that I don't like to argue with anybody like outside of school. I know a lot of people who enjoy debate when it comes to politics and stuff like that. I don't want any part of that. And it's funny because I'm an advocate and I have to argue every day to make sure the kids get what they need. But I really, that's really not, it's not my, it's not what I prefer to do. But any of you guys know, if you're passionate about something, and especially if you do it, so you engage in it, and then at the end of whatever it is, so in my situation, I attend these meetings with parents at school, and it might be really super aggravating, but I know my rights. I know the rights of the parent and the child. And so hopefully by the end of that meeting, we're in a space where that child is now going to get what they need. And so it's very rewarding when you learn what you need to know to go into these meetings and advocate for your child, and it might make you crazy on the pathway there, but when you can leave and feel really good about what you've accomplished, you're going to be really glad that you learned the skills that you did. So if that's you and you're a parent, first thing you got to do is you got to read your IEP. That's that plan. A lot of parents, because I'm reading them, so if a parent gets to me and they want some help, first thing I do is read their IEP, because I don't know your kid. I don't know anything about them. And I count on that IEP to tell me what I need to know so I can help you. And a lot of times I'll say to a parent, wow, this is in there. And they'll say to me, what's in there? Don't let that be you. You have to read that thing. You have to know what it is that the teachers are supposed to be giving your child or not. Because they're required under federal law to give your child what they need, and those needs must be documented in that document. And if it's not, then you're in a bigger problem than you really thought you were. So it's got to be clear. And if it's not, that's why you have, they call them interim IEP meetings. You as the parent can call a meeting with your school anytime you want. Now, I encourage you not to make everybody crazy, but sometimes you got to make them a little crazy to get them to mobilize. So you do what you got to do. But I just want you to know, don't plan on that once a year meeting, because they have like an annual date. So they have to rewrite the IEP and meet with you at least once a year. Don't do that just once a year. I have a 26-year-old who has autism, and when he was young, I would usually do 2 a year. So I would do the annual, and then I would have one somewhere in the middle. And of course, if there were issues that came up, I always had a meeting. So you can't let that stuff go. Whether you're advocating for yourself or you have an advocate that's going with you, it's so much easier to fix a problem when it's this big than when it's a mountain, because then your kid is definitely getting the raw end of the deal. But then you've got, human behavior. You have a teacher kind of set in her ways. You've got people that are responding a certain way at your school, and you don't want to give that a lot of time. If there's an issue, you need to address it, like as soon as you can, as soon as you know about it. All right, so you provide a day in the life. So what a day in the life is, I like it to be a 1-page document, and it's going to tell the school. So you guys who are looking into next school year, because we're just about done here with this one. So looking into next school year or the summer, if they're going to be going to the summer program. So in Broward, we're going to have ESY, so that's extended school year. And then we're going to have something called, I think they're calling summer programming or something like that. And that's for all kids. And so that means there's going to be new teachers for your child. So for that, you want to write up just a 1-pager. I encourage you not to go over the 1 page, but just let that be a presentation of just, this is how my kid is on an average day. What makes them tick? Are they freaked out by the alarms, the fire alarms or the bells in school? Do they do best if they sit near the bathroom? Because sometimes they got to go, and they got to go quickly, or they like to pace around the back of the room. If that's your kid, those are the kind of things you want to include in there. Request data. Schools are required to keep data of what they're doing and how they're helping your kids and what they're working on. Again, most parents do not know that. And a lot of times, not so much now, it's a little bit harder for me to read now because your IEP meetings are like this way, right? They're online. But when I would be sitting in the same physical space with the whole team, including the parent, and I would say to the teacher, so do you have some data on that? A lot of times she would kind of look around like, uh-oh, who's got data? What is she asking for? And of course, then they would say, oh yeah, I have it. It's in the room. I don't think in most of those cases there's any data, but I give them the opportunity to kind of go figure it out and then come back together. I found with my son at the beginning of every year, I would let the teachers know, I'm going to want to see data. I'm going to want to see it once every 9 weeks. And so just giving you a heads up. Now, a lot of times I didn't want to see the data. If he was doing really well and I didn't have any concerns, I didn't request the data, but they didn't know that. And I wanted them to keep data. Again, they're required to keep it, but a lot of times that's not what's happening. Request new assessments. So if you have a child who just, they're not making progress. And so look at this year's IEP, look at last year's IEP and see, is there progress? I do not care what your kid's disability is, how impacted they are. That's irrelevant to me. Every child should be making progress in school, everyone. And if you see that that's not happening, you need to have a conversation with them and say, I want to see some assessment information. And if you don't think that their assessments really are telling you what you need, which should be telling you, how does your kid think? How do they process information? How do they learn? If you're not seeing that, then you can ask for a full psychoeducational evaluation from your school. You as the parent are allowed to ask for that anytime you want. If the school says, yeah, we don't think so, okay, that's not a right that they have. Now, I'm not telling you to go in there and ask for something if you don't really need it. If they say, why do you want it? And you go, I don't know, I just want it. That's not really a good reason. There's two main reasons. One is your child's not making the progress that they should, and nobody can figure out why. And the other one is if their educational label is other health impaired, which is where a lot of kids with attention deficit kind of fall under that label. But you think, you know what, there's some signs of autism, or you've had a doctor diagnose your child with autism and you think we really need to consider autism. Then you ask for an evaluation that would look at that, and that would kind of tease out, if the school sees that there. Request daily home notes that give you what you need. A lot of times kids that are in these special programs, they might get a daily note with a bunch of happy face stamps on top. That's not a home note to me. If you're satisfied with it, then that's fine. But to me, a parent would want to know, what did he do today? Did she talk to friends today? Did she share? I mean, what actually happened in school? So if that's you, I just encourage you to look at that. I used to create my own home note for my son. I would just sit home and think, okay, so what do I need to know? And then I would let the school know, this is what the home note needs to say, because what you're sending me it's not good enough. Ask for specifics on how instruction will be given. And, you as a parent can ask those kind of questions. Like, how are you going to work with my kid? What programs are you using? What curriculum? What approaches? Because that will help you at home too. Kids who make the most progress and have the best outcomes is where the parent and the school are working together and communicating with each other, from everything from spelling test words all the way up to, I don't know, chemistry, whatever, but working together on that stuff. And data. And data could be work samples. So your kid comes home, say, and they have something in their backpack that's got a bunch of red X's all over it and an F. I would be taking a picture of that. I would be sticking that in a folder, because if that's continuing, because everybody has a bad day. So if that's continuing, that's a problem. And I would want to have all those samples with me when I go have a sit down and I say, just look at what's happening here. How are you helping my child? What more do they need? I sadly have to do a lot of due process cases, which I'll kind of get into a little bit in a minute, but it's where the parent really exercises their rights to the next level. And the best outcome cases when it comes to those is when the parent keeps data. It's home notes, it's emails from your teacher or from you. So if you're seeing a problem, you're going to be emailing, what's going on with this? What's going on with that? And then keep track of all of those, because the more information you have, the better. The teacher is required to keep data on your child and the progress or lack of. So you want to be able to check that out. All right, so school requirements, because I think it's really important that you guys know the school has requirements. So again, IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So in that law, it encourages parent participation. So it literally requires the school to reach out to you guys to figure out ways to include you in the education of your child. They have to follow the IEP. They don't get to maybe sort of, I want to, I don't want to kind of thing. They're required to follow it. A lot of times the biggest area that I tend to find this is challenge is middle school. Regular education, middle school teachers often, well, this is middle school, we do things different. No, if it's in the IEP, they have to do it. And if they have a problem with it, then they need to call an IEP meeting and they need to talk about, why they have a problem with it. But once it's in your child's IEP, they're required to follow it. Provide a student what they need in order to make meaningful progress. Okay, not making half a percentage improvement in an entire school year. That's not, if a kid knows, say, 20 sight words and the next year they know 22, I don't look at that as meaningful. Something's broken. So being able to look to see, and that's you guys need to be part of that. What is meaningful to you and your child? What are you looking for as far as progress? And the goals on that IEP should help everybody kind of keep track of that. Provide FAPE. And what FAPE stands for is a free and appropriate public education. And that is regardless of somebody's opinion or a guideline that they're given. Sometimes I have like a little wheel spinning, so hopefully I'm not freezing on you guys. If I am, hopefully it's moving quickly past that. Appropriate evaluations. So, keeping track of evaluations that are relevant to your child and their needs, and then the least restrictive environment. The least restrictive environment is different from child to child. For some childs, that environment is a regular education classroom with no extra support. So it's just the teacher and, I don't know, the 18 kids or however many kids are in the room. For some kids, it's that same classroom with an aide to help them. For some kids, it's a special education classroom for an hour a day, 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day. For some kids, it's a special program. So it is purely based upon the needs of your child and where those needs can best be met. However, schools will oftentimes pigeonhole kids. So what I mean by that is, oh, your child has autism. We're going to put them in an autism program. That's not what the law says. The law says they need to look at every child to see who they are and where their needs can best be met. And if they need a separate classroom, then that discussion is had. But most kids with disabilities are not in separate segregated classrooms. They're out there in regular classrooms all across this country. And that's a good thing because that makes for better outcomes. I've been doing this long enough where I have been an advocate for a kid at 3 years old when they come into the system, into preschool, and I've watched them graduate out. And I will tell you, the best outcome kids are the kids who are included in regular education for at least a majority of their day. Placing kids in separate segregated classrooms surrounded by other kids with significant needs usually does not create a really great opportunity or skill set as they exit out. I mean, and just think about it. If your kid struggles with social skills, how would putting them in a classroom with other kids who also struggle with social skills, how's that really going to help them in being able to socialize with kids who have good skills? So that's just an example. Distance learning plans. So if you have a kid in public school, you may have seen or heard about your distance learning plan. These are not in IDEA. So that means that schools don't get to say, oh, you're in a distance learning plan. That means less services. That doesn't say that anywhere. That's like a no-go. I know that we're hopefully nearly done with distance learning plans, but just if it ever pops up again, I just want you to know that there's no provision in the law that allows them to do what they want with that. Pastor Joel, just keep an eye on the chat for me because I'm not I'm not looking at that. All right, so reconnecting means letting them know that you know. And what I mean by that is, my son, when he was in school, I never had to file due process. So I'd never had to exercise my rights and basically, create a formal complaint that got sent to the Department of Education and to what's called an administrative law judge. but they always knew I would. And so that's really, my son got a good education. It was good. It was public school, but it was a good education. And I think that that was in great part because they knew that I knew my rights, and they kind of knew a little bit better than to try to tell me otherwise. But that can be you too. So you got to just be really careful that you understand your rights and seek out. Again, there are people out there that can help you guys understand your rights. So here's just a couple of tips on dealing with the virtual IEP meetings, because your IEP meetings are this way. So for you guys who have those kids with IEPs, you know, you're doing them this way online. The only thing that's supposed to have changed about your IEP meetings is that they're being run, is the in how they're being run is the location. That's it. Do not allow removal of services if they still are needed. So language therapy, for instance, if your child needs language therapy and they're getting it for 120 minutes a week, but your kid maybe is doing distance learning, that does not mean that you decrease that service. That's, there's like none of that. So they still need to get whatever it is that they need to get. The only thing I'm going to say that's a little tricky in these virtual meetings is I am very much about body language. And when I'm sitting in a meeting, I'm looking at people around the table. I'm looking at their faces. I'm looking at how they're sitting. I'm looking to see, are they crossing their arms and are resistant to what I'm saying? Are they turning in their chair? I mean, what's happening? Because a lot of that stuff gives me cues on, you know, I guess my next step and what I need to do. And as an advocate, if you guys are going to advocate for your children or for other children, you gotta learn a little bit about that if you don't already. And this type of format does cause some challenges with that. Today I was in a meeting and the teacher in the meeting had her mask on the whole time because she was in a classroom during the meeting. And that makes it more difficult. You know, it makes it hard because you can't really see, you can't see their face. So it's a little bit hard unless they're talking. And so that's certainly a challenge. But I do think that we will be going back to in-person meetings, but I don't think we're going to see it even at the beginning of next year. If I had a crystal ball, I'd probably say next January is when more schools will be doing that. I do like that it's an option for families who have to work and can't go to the school for these meetings. So I like that. The one thing I will tell you that I don't like about it is, and if you pay attention, you will catch it, but it's tricky to, it's a challenge to figure it out. When you're in the same physical space with them, there's nowhere they can run or hide, or I mean, they're all sitting there together and they have to work with you and try to figure out some of the challenges that come up in the meeting. If you're in this format, they can shut their camera off. They can shut the camera off. They can call somebody. They could do all kinds of things and you won't know what's happening. So you just need to watch out for that kind of stuff. All right, so do your research. So you have to understand your child's disability, your rights under IDEA, including that least restrictive environment, and FAPE, again, free and appropriate public education, and have a parent-teacher conference. So you want to do that. Every one of you guys who has a child with an IEP, you get a little booklet every year. Of course, now they're just sending them through, digital format, called your procedural safeguards. In that booklet, it explains to you your rights and what to do if you're in disagreement with the school. You have to read that. It is important. I hardly ever see a parent who reads that. And so then when they call me and I say, well, okay, did you read your procedural safeguards? What? So you gotta pay attention to that. You gotta make sure that you understand your rights, because that's how you get your kids what they need. So for the IEP, you want to read your old one and you're going to get a draft of the new one. At least you should be. You should be in Broward. They sort of have it's a policy, but it's not technically a policy, but that you get the draft of the new IEP 5 days in advance. There's a lot of districts that do it. And I will tell you, when my son was young, that was well before we formally did these drafts. I would ask the school for a draft in advance so that I could sit on my couch at night and read it. Because if even me as an advocate, if I walked into that meeting and they said, wow, he was under the table this morning and we had a really hard time getting him out, I wouldn't be able to focus on what we're talking about. My brain would be on why, what happened, what did you do, how did you respond, is he okay? And so you really have to get that. And then you're going to compare it. You're going to look at the old one, you're going to look at the new one, and hopefully you will see growth. And if you don't, that's a problem. So you need to be talking to them about that, because and the other thing, if you have the same goals, you should not have the same goals year to year. That's like a no-go. Something is broken. If you write goals for your child IEP for your child, then those goals should be able to be mastered in a year's time. If it is not, you need to go back to the drawing board and really, I mean, it's not your job to dictate or even to figure out curriculum, but you can definitely say, you guys are the educators. So this doesn't seem to be working. What are you going to do? What do you suggest? And people go into education, most of them, because they want to make kids, change kids' lives. They want to educate kids. And sometimes it takes people like you and I to basically remind them that you're counting on them to help your child make progress. And if you throw it back at them, a lot of times they will come out of it, shining. They will help you discover what to do. But far too often, you're gonna have to get them moving. All right, number 3, be sure that your device is charged. So if you're using a laptop, if you're using your phone, whatever you're using, you want to make sure it's charged. You want to make sure you have, Wi-Fi. You want to make sure that all that stuff is ready to go, because you can't engage if you've got just all the stuff going on and happening. So again, in Broward, so if there's people on here from other counties, they're going to call it other things, but in Broward, the ESE specialist is the person who runs your meetings. And so like some places called a staffing specialist, and they should be sending you the link a few days before that meeting. Write your parent input before the meeting and email it to that ESE specialist. In case you don't know, on the very first page, pretty much it doesn't really matter where you live, it's almost always on the first page, there's a section of your IEP that says parent input. Sometimes I will get an IEP and there might be the one sentence that's there, it says parent agrees with everything in this IEP. And I'll say to the parent, do you know that it says that? And they'll say, where? So you have, and sometimes I even see an NA in there, like not applicable, which is truly horrifying. So you need to, your input is valued and valuable. So write that when you're not freaking out in the meeting and getting upset about something that's happening. Write it when you're sitting home, when you can think clearly, the kids are in bed, and you can get that written and send it to them. You want to make sure that you document any concerns that you have. What time out of school has been like. Did they progress? Did they not? How much time did you invest over this last year in your child's learning? If you're doing private therapies, document that there, because you want to show that you're doing something with them too. You're running ragged in the afternoons, getting them from this therapy to that therapy. Or like in my case, my son really struggled with math, and it was me and him sitting at the dining room table every day, sometimes for hours a day. And I was going to document that there. When he was in high school, I really liked his math teachers, but they didn't know how to teach him in the way that he really learned. And I needed help with that. So I wanted to document it that, yeah, this is taking a boatload of time from me. You want to have that in there. Invite someone to go with you. It doesn't have to be an advocate. It could just be a friend. It could be your mother, your husband, your wife, your uncle, your whoever, to sit there, because you're going to miss stuff. You just are. This is your child. You're passionate about your child, and you're not going to pick up on everything. You're not going to remember it, especially if somebody ends up going off on a tangent somewhere. You're not. And sometimes it's just having that person there that's really beneficial. And sometimes having that person there it almost is like they're a witness, because there are times when I go to an IEP meeting and it goes really good. I don't hardly have to say anything. And we'll leave, both back when it was in person and now online, we'll leave and the parent will say to me, my meetings never go like that. They always want to fight with me. It's something always comes up. Sometimes when you have someone else there, they don't really have to even say or do anything. It just gets the school to think, uh-oh, we better cross our T's and dot our I's. So that's important. Camera on. So if you're doing these virtual meetings, I highly encourage you to have your camera on. And the school staff is not required to have their meetings on, but when I go to a meeting and they don't have their cameras on, I will ask, are you going to turn your cameras on? My personal opinion is that you are valuable and this child's IEP is important and they shouldn't be multitasking. And you really can't tell if your teacher is actually sitting there paying attention to your child's IEP if you can't see him or her. So again, you can't make them, but 99.9% of the time, if I say, are you guys going to turn your cameras on? All of a sudden, all the cameras come on. And sometimes they'll say, oh, but the bandwidth, we have bandwidth issues. No, that's not, that is, I go to IEP meetings every single day, usually 2 or more a day. And they're in the schools. There's no bandwidth issues in the schools. I'm looking at everybody's face, no matter if we have 5 people in the meeting or 12 people in the meeting. I don't know who told them about that, but I never see that bandwidth as an issue. Don't let the meeting be rushed. So today, I was in the second meeting today, and it was a middle school kid. So the teachers were like on the calendar until 4. And so it was like 3:30. I knew we were still at least another hour from being done, and I was not going to let it rush. So I said to the ESC specialist, maybe we should look at our calendars, because I know, teachers are going to leave us at 4 and we can't continue. You guys can't continue these meetings without teachers. That's a no-no. And the ESC specialist said, well, team, is everybody willing to stay as long as it takes? And they said yes. It was like 6 o'clock. I think it was actually after 6 when we finished that meeting. That is extremely rare, extremely. But that ESC specialist, I don't think she wanted to look at us again. So she wanted to get it done today. But if you don't finish, you just say, you know what, I don't think we're going to get done today. So we need to just stop and we could pick up again. It's so much better to do that than to rush and be unhappy with your meeting. If you're confused about something, you need to ask questions. Don't let them go too fast for you guys to keep up and to learn. If it's your annual, this is your annual meeting. You want to make sure that it is as good as possible and as ready as possible to meet your child's needs. Collaboration is the action of working with someone to produce and create. And so there's just some necessary pieces for that. Shared goals. You and the school need to agree on the goals. Don't go into a meeting and think, oh, well, okay, she wrote those goals. I don't really think those goals are relevant. And so whatever, that's not a good attitude. So you need to have a conversation with them. Your child is with them for like a minute in time. Parents of children with disabilities oftentimes are going to be intertwined with their child's life for as long as they're alive. Your kids may not always live with you, but chances are good that you're going to be more vested in their lives than, a typical kid where you're just like, oh, great, she went to high school, she went to college, she graduated, she's moving to whatever, I don't know, New York, she's got a great job, and I'll talk to her once a month. Chances are good if you have a kid with this disability, that's not going to be your future. And so the decisions that teachers are making, they're only having to kind of look at the moment. But you guys have to look forward. You have to look into what's going to be coming. So that's why it's really important that your voice is heard. They need to build these plans around what you as the family unit, what's important to you and to the future of your child. Joint responsibility. Everybody's got to have a role in the development of these kids. It's, that thing that it takes a village. Yes, it takes a village, and sometimes that village has to get really big for some of these kids that have complex needs. Common planning, you guys got to plan together. Frequent and clear communication, so it could be the home notes, but work with your teachers to figure out a way to do that. And reliable records. If you're looking at the data and you're like, this is not really, this isn't beneficial, then having conversations with them. So this is me. So I just put the information up here for Family Network on Disabilities. And for those of you who joined us later, Family Network on Disabilities is an organization that's funded by Broward County government to provide advocacy support. We have a couple of advocates in my office. We have English speaking, Spanish, and Creole. So anybody who, might speak another language besides mine, they could call our office. We can hook them up. We go to these meetings with families. We'll also help families develop behavior plans, reevaluation plans, make sure that if they need assistive technology, whatever it is that they need in school in order to make the progress that they can. We're funded, there we go. The CSB is the Children's Services Board, and it's basically Broward County Commissioners. We're free to most parents living in Broward County of children who have a developmental disability, and you get a one-on-one advocate. So, I mean, it's a pretty cool deal. And we're kind of an anomaly in Florida. There is Family Network on Disabilities of Florida. They do trainings. They provide a lot of trainings, but they do not provide one-on-one advocates. That's not something that they do. If you live in Miami-Dade, Parent to Parent of Miami-Dade is similar to what we do. They have kind of changed over the years. They used to be we basically did the same thing. They covered Miami-Dade. But I think things have changed there a little bit, but they have some excellent advocates there. So if you happen to live there, contact them. If you live in Palm Beach, the ARC of the Palm Beaches, some years they provide advocacy support, some years they don't. So just check them out. They're a really good resource up there. All right, so let